I was going to tell a parable.
Safety rule, and we're supposed to be here every time.
I'd rather be careful. Much more.
Good evening. Welcome. Happy to have so many folks here tonight. Happy to have you here for the this Wendell Town Board of Commissioners meeting. We're going to be led tonight by in the Pledge of Allegiance by Police Chief Bill Carter.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, our invocation by the Wendell Council of Churches. We're going to hear from Wendell Christian Church, Mike Harrison. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Madam Mayor and the Board of Commissioners, and guests, on behalf of Wendell Council of Churches, welcome. Glad to have you here. Please join me in prayer. Gracious God, as we gather together in this quiet time, with heads bowed and eyes closed, we come united to lift up our thanksgiving for our community and the peace and comfort we feel as a blessing afforded to us by living here. While we come in thanksgiving for such blessings, we also come in prayer because there are many in this world, our state, and maybe even our community who feel it difficult to realize that their particular situation is a blessing. At this time, we pray for those individuals. Lord, we know we're living in a difficult time when confusion is foremost in what we are told. People are hurting and even dying from senseless circumstances. Misguided decisions and dysfunctional family units are seemingly overlooked, but we come to you believing that your will to heal us from all situations that we might encounter in our individual lives. Thus, we lift up our prayers for your grace and intervention to the world and to right the wrongs and to open our hearts to peace, love, and caring forever. We pray for our elected leaders at all levels as they deliberate the many tasks that they undertake, many more of which may not be important to us, but they're important to someone. Our prayer is for you to speak to those in position of decision making and touch their hearts and inspire their decisions based on a simple statement: what would you do? In closing, we pray and intercede for our elected leaders and their families at all levels, and those in authority over us in any way, to make all decisions in the best interest of those entrusting them to decide. We pray that your Spirit will rest upon them and guide their management, guided by your grace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Is anyone, do we know if anyone signed up for public comment tonight? That's okay. So we have, let me see, 3 signed up for public comment tonight. When your name's called, come to the podium, state your name and address, please, for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Direct your comments to the full town board, not any individual, and you can watch the lights up on the podium, and when it's green, you can speak. When it's yellow, it's getting ready to turn red. When it's red, I'll stop you. And you have 3 minutes. So, first person we're going to hear from is Linda Newcomb.
Mary, did we approve the agenda?
You know what, maybe we didn't. Sorry, thank you. I was so focused on not having the thing. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
Madam Mayor, if we could move items 6B and 6C to 4.
Yes. 4B and 4C. So we have a motion to approve the agenda with those changes. Is that correct, Commissioner Joyner?
Yes, ma'am.
All in favor?
All right.
Again, I apologize, I was distracted by the list. So first, we're going to hear from Linda Newcomb.
Good evening, I'm Linda Newcomb, I'm at 10 West Academy Street. My concern is, I know they want to put an arcade downtown, and I think that it's good that the kids will have something to go to, but I also want to know what kind of restrictions are going to be placed on there, because I do not want it to become where, oh, guess what, Mom and Dad don't want to take care of the kids tonight, so let's just drop them downtown Wendell and let the town and the business take care of those children. And I don't think that that's right. I would like to see some rules and regulations placed that children cannot be left there for X amount of time, that they must be a certain age, and if they're under this age, that they must be accompanied by an adult. And I know that the police are overbearing with a lot of things, but it's not their responsibility to make sure these children act right, it's the parents. So I can see that if there is no controls placed onto it, that there can be havoc wreaked upon the town, and that the town could have some pretty substantial lawsuits because of things that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next is Regina Harmon.
Regina Harmon, 6616 Tails Branch Road. I'm here again tonight to plead with you guys one more time over the arcade, and before any decision is made tonight, to please move it to a special use. I'm not asking you to do anything to the business or to the individual that's operating the business. I'm asking you to put some rules on the type of business. You know, I hear all the time from the board things like, and Mr. Joyner has said it on numerous occasions, things like, well, just let a business open up and let the economy provide whatever. If the town wants it, the economy will fix it. Well, I disagree with that a little bit, because I'm a Republican, and I do believe that you don't need to govern too much in our town or tell us what to do, but I do believe that when you come to a town, or you open a business in a town, or you live in a town, there are some expectations of rules and guidelines that we know that are going to be put in place to keep our community safe, to allow our community to grow in the right place. Because if you're just going to let any rule happen and let any business come for any reason with no rules, I don't understand why we have a board of commissioners. I don't understand why you're sitting up there and you're elected into office, and you could just say, let anything happen, you know, let anything come. We need some kind of guidelines and some kind of rules to protect everybody else in this town, businesses that have come here and invested their life savings and trying to make this town a very economic, savvy, moving forward community. You know, you've got towns like Apex and Cary and Morrisville that are thriving. They're doing fantastic. And they have more rules than you know what to do with. And, you know, if we want our town to go in that direction and make sure that we are bringing other businesses into the community that want to invest in our town, our community, we need to make sure we're thinking of that when we're doing this. So all I'm asking is for you to put that special use, move the arcade to special use, and give it another look and put some rules and regulations in place. I mean, it's no different than being a parent and you have children, and you absolutely just say to your kids, well, I'm going to let you do whatever you want. You can just figure it out on your own. And things happen as you get older, and they can do whatever they want. They can run around. They can just stay out till all hours of the night, and you're not going to give them any rules or any discipline. But you do as a parent. You give them some rules to guide them in the right direction, and that's what our Board of Commissioners are supposed to do. You're up there to put some rules into place, to guide our town in a positive direction, and not just say, let whatever comes, and let the economy. Because there's always going to be a clientele base that is going to want whatever
Thank you.
economy
Your
you
time's
bring.
up.
Thank you.
Third one, Kathy Dara.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Kathy Dara. I live at 3512 Coach Lantern Avenue. And again, I am here to speak about the game room. And I sent everybody an email, and I thank you. Several of you reached out to me, and I do appreciate that. One of the things that was said last week was a special use doesn't give us much more than an appearance of some kind of protection. Well, if you have kids, if anybody up here has kids, how many have used the I'm going to count to 3? If you don't stop it, I'm going to count to 3. By the time you get to 2, those little ones drop what they're doing. Why? Is 3 some big bad thing? No. It's the appearance of you better knock it off. And I went for a special use. I was told several times that if I didn't put everything in there that I wanted, I could have my permit pulled. So is that true? Is that a fact? Or is that not the truth, as we were told 2 weeks ago that a special use, you have no power with it? We're not trying to thwart a business. What we're trying to do is protect everybody, including this young man who's starting a business. I mean, to some extent, we need to be also mentors to say you can't go in this direction. Because if a dog does some garbage on the side of the road, it will attract flies. So you need to be careful that you're not leaving stuff all over the place. Does that make sense? Okay. It's the end of my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
All right.
We'll move into recognitions, reports, and presentations with a twist tonight because we've added some stuff to it. Item 4A is a presentation of recommendations for the Wendell Town Hall. First, we're going to hear from Town Manager Mark Collins to introduce the item.
In talking with the commissioners upon arriving to Wendell, one of the frequent items of conversation from many of you were the need for staff to evaluate Town Hall and provide policy options for the commission to act on. The existing Town Hall has served the community well over its lifespan. It's been renovated, as described to y'all in the past. It's getting to the point that it's more of that revered old beater truck, if you will, and we're replacing tires, but it's time for a more major overhaul. Its systems, its structure are worn down, and it's time to look at the organization and being able to fit a modern workforce in a safe and productive environment that's reflective of the town's vision and goals. That may be using an existing town hall structure. It may be somewhere else. But rather than having a conversation about the maybes, staff reached out to Cumming, a company that does project management for large and small public projects, to evaluate this building and options with Town Hall, and then report out tonight to help inform the next step. As you recall, the Town Hall project is in the 5-year capital improvement plan, and so one of the things they were asked to do is evaluate doing a project sooner rather than later, and what that means as far as fiscal impact on the community. And with that, I'd like to introduce Chris Whitley to the podium to give his presentation on town hall options.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Good evening. Again, my name's Chris Whitley. I'm a vice president with Cumming. I run our Raleigh office. So I wanted to first of all, thank Mark and Brian and Daryl. They worked with us very closely as we started taking a look at this existing facility and talking about options and that sort of thing for the town hall. So just want to thank them for that. Again, as we start going through the presentation, feel free to stop me as we go through. I'd rather it be more of an interactive back and forth as we go through it, so feel free if you have a question to stop me as we go through. This is just kind of our agenda, I guess, for the presentation. We want to talk a little bit about the process that we went through in developing these options, talk about the staffing projections and the space summaries, actually show you some options, and then talk about next steps. As we started this process, we came in and spent some time in this existing building, going around with Brian and Mark and Daryl, looking at the ins and outs, talking about the ages of different systems, you know, looking at the condition of the building, and so we could just start getting a feel for what it could look like if we preserve this building, renovate it, and add on to account for the new staff changes. We also, the town provided us with some 10-year staff projections, what they think the staff will look like in 10 years, and we'll get to those in a moment, kind of talk about that. And we took those staff projections and kind of programmed the space that we think would be required to accommodate those folks. And that basically looks like this. I just put you a snapshot of, say, the finance department. Currently, there's 4 existing positions. The future, it looks like you may need 3 more. So we break down those departments, assign spaces based on what we see in other towns like yours or county-type buildings. And then so you can see that gives us about 1,500 square feet for the finance department that'll be needed in 10 years. So we went through each department in a similar fashion and developed a program for this building program. From that, we start looking at developing cost models. We look at, you know, what it will cost to renovate this, what it will cost to build the additional square footage, and so then we kind of get to the cost point of it, and also look at escalation factors, market stress in this area. We all know Raleigh's a booming area, so we take all those factors into account when we're developing these cost models that ultimately, should you decide to move forward with one of these options, would essentially become your budget for the project. And then finally, we reviewed these cost models with Mark, Brian, and Daryl, and talked about the options, talked about pros and cons, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we move forward. So essentially, after going through the information that was provided about future staff projection, it looks like you're going to need about 14,000 square feet. This current building is about 6,700 square feet. So there's 13 existing positions within the town. It looks like 11 more will be required, and then from that's through 10 years, and then from years 11 to 15, there's a good possibility that you may need even more folks after that. So that's just something to know. But we looked at the departments that would be located within a town hall, whether it's this one or a new one, and you would have the commission chambers, administration, finance, planning, and communications and technology. So here's a listing of the options that we came up with. It's really 2 primary options, options 1 and 2. Option 1 would be to renovate this existing facility and add on a 2-story addition to it. And it's the same. I'm having trouble explaining. It's the same as option 3. The only difference is option 1, we considered starting design in 2019. Option 3, we would start it a year later in 2020, and that does affect the cost somewhat. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. And then option 2 would be to build a completely new town hall on a new site, and it's the same as option 4. Again, the only difference is option 2 would start design in 19, option 4 would start it in 20. So option 1, this is basically an aerial of this facility, and you can see we've kind of highlighted an area where the 2-story addition would go. It's out where the old water tower used to be. So that just kind of orients you with what we're talking about. So it would be essentially, this building's about 6,700 square feet. It would be a full major renovation to this building. I know there's been roof issues over the years, so we'd be looking at putting a new roof on it. We've had some water intrusion through the walls, so we were gonna tuck point and waterproof all the exterior walls, a new HVAC system, abatement as required. If we get in and there's lead paint or asbestos, then we'll have to do some abatement. We would make it ADA accessible throughout. As you know, there's various levels within this building, so we would want to try to make it ADA accessible. Fire sprinkler, fire alarm, security, all of that would be new and updated. And then one piece of that, as we considered this option, is that we would probably need to temporarily relocate the current town staff into some type of portable office, whether it's one big modular unit or several portables somewhere. And so we've included that cost within our cost model. And then, of course, we'd just build a 7,500 square foot 2-story addition out front. 2,300 square feet of that would be shelf space that in years, say 11 through 15, if you started bringing on more staff, you could go in, renovate that space and create space for additional staff. This is just kind of the timeline for what it could look like. We're considering you would start design in July. It's hard to read, I apologize. Start design in July, like next month, and we just picked that out of the air just as a starting point. It would take, you would probably be receiving bids if we started design in July, around July of 2020, with a construction wrapping up around the end of April in 2021. So it's about a 10-month construction period. So your staff would really be relocated, probably could assume, for about a year. As we looked at this option, we talked about pros and cons. The pros, obviously, you'd get to maintain your existing site. You'd keep the town hall here where it's always been. You would maximize the use of the property that the town owns. The development cost for this, as you can see, it's about $5.3 million to do that option. That is lower than the other options. And you wouldn't have any kind of land purchase cost if that's the option that was chosen. The cons is it's a fairly small site. Construction logistics, that's just the fact that you're going to be building right up next to an existing facility. It's going to be kind of a tight site. So it would be a tougher construction project. Another con is, like we talked about, you'd be relocating your town staff, and that could provide some service disruption to your community because they're used to coming here and they're going to be somewhere else for a year. And then, of course, the limited parking that you have. There's not a lot of parking in this area, and as the town grows, that could continue to be a problem. And then the design would ultimately be a little less efficient because you're taking an existing space, adding on to it, where if you give an architect, you know, a clean sheet of paper, they're going to give you a more efficient town hall building. So we thought that was important to note. And then the unknowns during construction. Anytime you're going in a building this age, you know, you're likely to encounter unknowns, structural issues, things like that as you go through. And then the construction schedule for this option is actually about a month longer than if you were to just go build a new town hall. Any questions on option 1? Okay. Option 2, so what we looked at here was about 14,000 square feet, 2-story town hall. We would still shell out about 2,300 square feet of that space to basically that means it's not going to be conditioned and everything when you move into it, but it would be there for expansion in the future. We assumed a 3-acre site, not knowing if the town has land that they would like to consider, or if they were gonna buy land, so we had to assume something so we could assign some cost to the site portion of the cost model. And then just one note, there is no land purchase cost included in the budget that we give you. The timeline's essentially the same. If you were to start design in July, it is a month shorter. We think you can probably build a new one in about 9 months versus the 10 months with the renovation and the addition from option 1. So as you can see, the estimated cost is approaching $6 million for a new versus the 5.3 that we had for option 1. The pros would be a more efficient design like we talked about. Potentially more parking depending on the site size that was selected for a new town hall. Should have less unknowns when you go to build a new one than you would renovating this older building. The staff wouldn't be disturbed during construction, so therefore services to the citizens wouldn't be affected during that time, and like we talked about a 1 month shorter construction schedule. And the cons would be potential for land costs, that whether you use your land or if you have to go out and buy land, I don't know, I can't tell you what that would be, but that would have to be added to this number if you were to go purchase land. And then obviously it's a higher number than option 1, so it's got a higher development cost. Any questions on option 2? Okay. This is just a summary of all the options. Again, option 3 and 4 are only different in that they start design a year later. They start in 2020 versus 2019. Option 3 would be exactly like option 1. Option 4 would be exactly like option 2. You'll notice that the cost increased slightly. Again, Raleigh-Durham area is a booming construction area, and we've been seeing 5 to 6% escalation rates year over year in this area, and anticipate that's what we would be looking at moving forward. So that's kind of what we used when we projected out options 3 and 4. So next steps would be for you folks to determine the best option that best aligns with your vision for the town. And once you did that and decided you wanted to move forward, we'd be looking at procuring design services, getting architect, engineers on board to start design of the building. Perform due diligence on either existing or new site. The due diligence would be, if you select a new site, we probably need to get phase 1 environmental and phase 2 environmental studies done in case you had an old oil tank or something like that, so that we could identify those early on. And then once we do that, we would begin the design phase, and while implementing a continuous cost management model. The market's pretty volatile right now. I mean, I'm sure you guys heard about the steel tariffs and that sort of thing, so we would work with your architect or designers as they go through to evaluate different structural models and select the one that would be most economical to the town. Next, you'd develop bid packages, award a bid, construction phase, move in, and close out. So, you know, some of the closeout phase is obviously one that's not normally talked about a lot, but it's certainly a phase that's important, because if you don't end the project well, then it kind of leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth. So with that, I will gladly answer any questions that you have.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay. John?
Did you look at the cost of doing a 3-story building instead of a 2, or how much would an additional story of both the infill and
we did not look at a 3, but it would not make a drastic swing in the numbers to go from a 2 to a 3 in either way. So I wouldn't anticipate, and again, these are budget numbers, so they're a little full. You know, our hope would be that when we actually put this thing out for bid, that we would certainly be within budget on everything. So I don't think there would be a drastic swing one way or the other if it was 2, as long as the square footage stays the same. Now, if you increase square footage, it's obviously going to go up, but.
That's sort of what I meant. Like,
okay.
We're gonna be
A
building,
bigger building with a 3rd story.
If we're going,
Okay.
the same footprint but with a 3rd story, what is the additional cost?
It would probably be So you would probably be looking at about, so you're saying probably go to about 21,000 square feet, I'm
Because
guessing?
the extra 2,300, you said it would basically be 2,300
Correct,
shell feet,
right,
and finance alone, you said it's taking up 1,500 square feet.
Correct.
So, I mean, we could burn through that with 5 employees in a conference room.
right.
And so my question is, was that enough future growth space?
You're probably, if you were to say, jump it to say 21,000 square feet instead of 14, and just shell out the third floor, you're probably looking 1.2 to 1.5 million more for that additional square footage.
20%, 25%,
Yeah,
somewhere around there?
yeah,
For 33% more building?
correct.
Just trying to do the numbers.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you again.
Does the commission have additional questions that they would like staff to pursue on this topic to get to a decision point on renovation of the existing structure versus a new site?
So, for me, the only thing, I guess, with option 2 and 4, that's the new construction, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, if we're considering that, we should probably also consider locations. You know, what locations does staff have in mind for a new site?
I can give you several examples.
And cost and availability.
And I'll speak to what the town currently owns. So, option 1 and 3 we own is the current town hall site. You know, and so when we're looking at the pros and cons, one of my concerns with the current site kind of goes to John's question of what's the ability to expand to meet any growth of the town beyond the life of this building, or the 10-year staff analysis that was part of y'all's budget. There's an unknown out there, but we do know that additional space would be needed. There's not room to grow on our current site. There's also the parking issue is where does the staff park, and then where does the public in that larger community that's doing business with the town park? And that's limited at this point. So then when we look off-site, the town owns the block across the street from Town Square, which is a little larger than this site, and would allow a little more flexibility, but we have other community commitments and thoughts at that site. The other land that the town currently owns is at the town park. There's areas of land that would be separated from the park site and the community center when Landing View is extended up to 3rd Street with the second park entrance. And so there's a 3 to 8 acre area there that had been purchased by the town by a prior board and recombined in with the original park site. That would allow the town to have a town hall site that you could look at not having to go as vertical and reducing that cost, the ability to expand on site or provide other uses, and provide more of a municipal campus that's still in the downtown area. So that's kind of what we have under our control that's not adding land cost at this time. Anything else would have to require some negotiation with another property owner, and there would always be the ability, whether if we're not doing on this site, to then what do we do with this property becomes another part of that, and disposing of this property in a manner that y'all see fit, that could help offset some of that cost, or find some other public or nonprofit purpose moving forward.
Can we talk a little bit about how we got to this point?
Yes.
I think that'd be good for everyone to hear. They don't know, maybe.
Okay, so right now, when we hire a new staff, we're either gonna have to give up our one conference room, or we're gonna have to adapt the old jail cells into office space. It's hard to recruit talent to work in a jail cell. All right, so that's my reality as your manager today with workspace. The systems are old. You can hear wildlife outside the building in places where vents aren't closed up appropriately. You sneeze with outdoor allergies inside at times due to old brick walls. We're at a point right now where some significant investment needs to happen in this building, as evidenced by what it would take to renovate the portion of this building to get it to functional legal workspace. Part of that functional legal workspace is ADA compliance. The town has crossed a 50-employee threshold that necessitates that we start a 3-year transition plan for Americans with Disability Act compliance. And so when we're evaluating a building like this, we're also looking at our ability to bring this environment into that compliance. The functional use of the old space is questionable. Bringing prospective businesses to town or new employees and walking them through the 4 different previous lives of the building is an entertaining story, but that may also impact our perception to outside view. And so from a evaluation of our current space, I believe the commission, y'all have been talking for some period of time on this topic as well. And so, these are things, some I'm adding, but a lot of it I heard from you, from your conversation with the community and previous staff, and the need to move forward. One of the concerns was, how do you pay for it? So the capital improvement plan identifies that. We're able to incrementally increase dedicated revenues that would cover the cost of the debt service. So that there's a financial plan to cover the cost of this facility, whether it's here or somewhere else. That's not an issue. One of the issues, though, might be the longer we delay, the increased construction costs. And so one thing the finance director and I are looking into is kind of that ability to start design now and construction, but having a resolution in place to pay back, to reimburse the town for the upfront expense, so that your debt service payments are consistent or very close to what's in the capital plan. So that limits the impact of moving it forward, and hopefully is more than offset by cost savings of going earlier rather than later. If we're borrowing money, there's also a concern about how long interest rates stay low as opposed to move up. Because if you're looking at a borrowing over a number of years, that can also increase your costs. It's not factored into this. Off-site, one thing I heard consistently was from most of you was it'd be nice to retain a downtown presence. That it's a reason that people come to the historic part of Wendell, that they associate with the community, and looking for opportunities to get synergy from other sites and activities. So the ability to have the town hall setting and then the community center or other outdoor activities nearby provides additional space that can help have that synergy with municipal operations. That location would also allow for the second entrance road to be constructed as part of this project and have that done. It would also allow for infrastructure to be extended to other areas of the park so that bathrooms and other things that need water and sewer are available over by the new recreation field. So there's some potential benefits of looking off-site, but if this building and location is important to you or the community, it is an option to move forward, and we can always resolve some of the other space issues if resources allow. But that's, so the policy, we're kind of at a policy decision point.
Yeah.
The money's planned, the project, something a majority of y'all have said we'd like to move on. So really staff would like to know, are we moving forward with a design here or design off-site so we can start preparing the documents that we need to move forward with that. Then from a timing standpoint, if we have an opportunity to save money and it's not an additional cost in our financial plan, should we move forward or should we wait? But those are kind of the two questions we have at this point. Does that get you to?
Yeah. All right, so the town staff's looking for some direction.
This seems like to me something that we probably should, that we need to sit down sooner than later and start, I mean, as a group of us, look at these sites that the manager presented to us and start to really kind of come to some decisions, because the costs are going up and we have a need that's present. Then I'd rather set a plan in place sooner than kicking the can down the road and keep waiting on it. That's my opinion.
Anyone else?
I've had the great fortune of working on old houses and old cars, and the cost never seems to align with what you think it does in the beginning. You know, I'm getting older, and my maintenance costs seem to be going up. You know, Lee Majors was the $6 million man, not the $20,000 man. You know, when you got to rebuild something, I've been sitting here and I thought it was really funny, but I was watching the light on the ceiling and there was water. You could see the sunlight reflecting off the water. It hadn't rained in several days. There's water reflecting off the roof. There's standing water on this roof.
That's because every time it rains, they get up there and squeegee the roof off.
You know, and I'm sure the AC units, you know,
Public Works.
they drip on them too, and
Yeah.
you know, it concerns me to think about rehabbing this building any more than we already have. I love this old building. It used to be a fire station too, not while I was here, or while I was on the fire department, but I think it's been a long time coming. It's been something I've been talking about since the very first work session I attended 6 years ago. I think there may be a few other options, but perhaps this would be something we could discuss at a work session or something. Commissioner Joyner said something about moving it to a work session, and I'm talking about it. I'm in favor of doing something because we're already out of space, and I thought the manager was going to say before we hire anybody, we got to fire somebody else. So that's never a good plan. So.
Anyone else?
Do we want to set a work session on the,
Yeah,
a work session on the calendar?
Looks like they want to have a work session just to talk about this. So,
Is there any particular direction about evaluating, just talking through different off-site options?
Well, for me, it's seeing all of it in one place. So here in Butch, numbers plus this, we've had different presentations on it. putting all the presentations in one place. And then, I was thinking a work session because we've got several other things, and if we could put the ability to go into closed session on that work session, which I know we normally notice it that way anyway, but, in case we do want to talk about other sites without driving up the price of those sites just by talking about them.
And possibly without going into too much time on it, looking at the demo of this building, expansion of new construction on this site.
So you want to establish and maybe put out some options, and see about everyone's availability when you feel like you can get that information together.
Will do.
Is that where we are? Okay, all right. All right, we're gonna go to item 6B now. Which is the appointment of the Citizen Advisory Boards for the town of Wendell.
Okay. Sorry. I knew that.
Madam Mayor, members of the board, I was just going to go over a bit of what we talked about at the June 10th board meeting, a review for the recruitment for the Town of Wendell Citizen Advisory Boards. It began on April 23rd and closed on May 23rd. Communication efforts were released throughout the month, and the town received a total of 13 applications. As was discussed, there are 2 citizen advisory boards that had applications submitted: the Economic Development Committee, which has 3 vacancies, and the Planning Board, which has 5, 4 in-town and 1 ETJ. Please note that the Planning Board received 7 in-town applications and 2 ETJ applications. However, staff requests that the board take notice that one of the ETJ Planning Board applicants withdrew their application, which is communicated in item 6B's Attachment A packet. I've also provided a list of all the applicants, both on the PowerPoint and in your agenda packet. The specific action requested for tonight, staff requests that the Board of Commissioners make appointments to the Planning Board and Economic Development Committee by using the ballots provided at today's meeting. Once appointments have been made, the board may reach out to remaining applicants if known personally and ask if they would be willing to serve on the Tree Board or Appearance Commission, which received no applications this year. Staff also offers to reach out to East Wake High School about an opportunity for students to serve on the Tree Board or the Appearance Commission. The town will be sending out acknowledgement letters to applicants tomorrow, with appointment letters being sent out via email on Friday with the results of the board's decision this evening. And with that, I'm going to pass out the ballots, and you guys can vote.
Thank you.
realizes you can't read my signature, so I'm gonna print my name too.
Okay, for the planning board, it has shown that we have a tie, so Madam Mayor, if you wouldn't mind voting for the planning board. Oh, thank you, forgot, hadn't done it in a while. I know. Crazy. Okay, we have the results. For in town on the planning board, we have Michael Firstbrook, Brett Hennington, Jimena Huffman Hall, and Levin Jones. And for the ETJ, T. Allen Swaim Jr. Do I need to know? For the Economic Development Committee, our top three are Haley Day, Amanda S. Norris, and H. Lee Mabry. Okay. All right, thank you for voting, and I will send the appointments out this week.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody who applied. Willingness to serve is really important. We have several openings still on a couple of other boards. We'd love for people to apply to those. I love the idea of contacting Eastwick High School as well. I do think it maybe needs to be a rising senior to serve on those, the tree board and the appearance commission. So I like the idea of that. I think that's a good thing to do. But those would be one-year appointments. We might need to work that out. So, but I think it needs to be an older student. Let's go now to 5C, which is now 4C, 6C, formerly 6C, and it's the second reading for a zoning text amendment to Section 10.4 of the UDO as it relates to parking requirements in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 16A-75. We'll hear from Mr. Burkmark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. This item was the second reading of a public hearing item that we had at our last meeting dealing with parking adjustments to Section 10.4 of the UDO. The town is the applicant in this case. Because we only had a 3-2 vote, we are required to go through another reading of it, but we also, in response to some of the concerns that were expressed at last meeting, staff checked with the attorney and did prepare some kind of a second option that might help address some of the concerns expressed. So you have in your material essentially two versions of that ordinance for adoption that would affect the minimum number of parking spaces. And again, just to briefly recap, your minimum number both sets, minimum amount of parking you have to have for a use, as well as impacts when pervious paving requirements would kick in, because it's based on what your original minimum required is, and it's a certain percentage of that, 150% or 200%. And there were some changes put into Wendell Falls as part of this as well. So in your report, and I can go back through this background material if desired, but we did look at a number of other jurisdictions to see how we compared, and in general we were lower on these categories. That's why we picked these specific categories, specific 5 uses to look at addressing the minimum number of parking spaces required for retail and restaurants and so forth. So in terms of the amendments now, you have the version 1 is exactly what was presented to you at the public hearing. That sets a flat minimum number that goes up for those 5 categories, and versus the version 2 applies essentially a range. So, for example, for the office development, if it currently requires 2 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet, and we were looking, originally we proposed to move that up to 3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet as the new minimum. Version 1 would just change that number from 2 to 3, while the second version made available to you actually shows a range of 2 to 3 and has a footnote attached to that table that essentially allows a developer to come in and select a minimum that applies within that range. So if and part of this was meant to address the concern expressed over small businesses that may not need as many parking spaces, rather than require them to have more parking spaces than they need for their use potentially. They could select the low end of that range. They could select 2, as long as it's within the range provided. While if it was a user that was more of It could be a corporate headquarters or something like that. Some user that knows that they need a lot more parking spaces. They could apply the high end of that range. They could select that, and they could say, well, I would like the 3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet to be my minimum. And then again, as long as it's within that range, that's acceptable. They get to make that choice, and then that helps control when any kind of pervious paving requirements to come in, so that larger user could then have more parking spaces on their site before the pervious paving requirements come in that are more costly than your typical parking spaces. So again, just to go back through, the ones we were looking at changing in version 1, it would be going for office service uses from 2 spaces per 1,000 to 3, for retail uses from 2 spaces to 3.33. These are both per 1,000 square feet. For restaurants, from 1 space to 1.25 per 4 seats. For entertainment and recreation uses, from 1 per 1,000 square feet to 2 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. And finally, for theaters, going from 1 per 3 seats inside the theater to 1 per 4 seats. So that was exactly what was presented to you at the last hearing. And in red, you're seeing now where we'd be applying version 2, just the range, 2 to 3, the same thing, except applying that range for them to select within for those same uses. And there would be an additional footnote attached to version 2, just making it clear that applicants may select that minimum parking ratio within the range provided to apply to their development or business. Again, Planning Board, when they had the version 1 brought before them, were in favor of this, unanimously in favor of the recommended change. There's a statement of plan consistency included in both versions. You have 2 ordinances essentially attached that you could select between if you so chose to, with a comprehensive plan principle referenced. Again, this was just kind of somewhat spurred by a specific development that was looking at a larger office service use, but this caused us to look at all the other municipalities. How do we compare, and is this something that we need to address? And what we came to is, yes, we do seem to be somewhat out of line with our other neighboring jurisdictions. But you have the 2 versions to kind of choose between, again, based on some of the comments were made at the public hearing. Be happy to address any questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Burkmark?
I like the version 2 that they presented to us today. I think that gives a little more flexibility with businesses, and depending on kind of exactly what their need is, especially in the office services category, which can vary a lot between what offices and services they're providing. So I like the new version 2. I think it's a good option.
I like the range. I like giving people the ability to tailor it for their specific needs a little bit more.
Having said that, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the text amendment to section 10.4 with version 2 of the general parking requirements.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the text amendment with version 2 of the parking requirements. Is that correct? Is there any discussion on the motion? Yes.
I'd just like to say I'm against this for reasons I stated at the last meeting. I'm still against it. I feel like the town of Wendell is already, while we're not in line with the other cities around us, it's because we allow a much wider range. We have a smaller minimum and no maximum. So by doing this, we become more restrictive, and we require businesses to put in more parking spaces that they may not need. There are other reasons, environmental, walking distances, and numerous other reasons that that I went over the last meeting. But my position remains the same, that I don't feel this is a change that needs to be made at this time.
Anyone else?
So for me, I was against it last time. I have talked with staff, and thank you, staff, for answering my questions on the biggest issue to me was water runoff, and evidently this permeable pavement, after about 5 years, it gets clogged and it's obsolete, doesn't do anything. It's not beneficial. So after my research, I have had a change of heart on it.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay. All right, thank y'all very much. And we're gonna go back to item number 5, our public hearings. The first was an evidentiary hearing, continued from Monday, April 22nd, for special use request. That, has been, the applicant has withdrawn the special use request for that, and no action is required, at this time by the Board of Commissioners. So we're gonna go to 5A, public hearing request to rezone 18.94 acres of property located along Wendell Falls Parkway, identified by PIN number 17833850088. Oh lordy, there's a bunch of them. To a NC conditional district to be developed as townhome residential neighborhood. Mr. Bergmark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. As stated, this is a public hearing for conditional district rezoning request coming before you tonight. We're asking you to hold this public hearing and consider taking action if you're prepared to do so. You do have an ordinance for adoption that you could use if you were prepared to. And in this case, it would be any approval would be subject both to the ordinance as well as the master plan that goes along with the conditional district. The applicant is Arnold Huerta. They're looking at attempting to rezone approximately 19 acres. It's 4 tracts, with one tract being the primary, almost 17 and a half, and then a few smaller pieces that went along with it in the purchase. Looking to rezone it to a neighborhood center or NC conditional district to be developed as a townhome residential neighborhood, entirely townhomes. Currently, this area is zoned NC or neighborhood center. The proposal consists of 101 townhome units as well as recreational amenities, including playground, volleyball court, dog park, and park space. This is just south of our town park currently, along Wendell Falls Parkway, across from the existing Jones Landing subdivision, and the entry drive to that Jones Landing subdivision, Landing View Drive, would be the primary entry into this development as well, and would serve as a future entry point to the town park, eventually, once we connected it through adjoining land that we own. The NC, or Neighborhood Center District, is coded to provide for areas of residential and mixed-use development near existing and planned neighborhood centers. Intent is to create that higher density residential area that complements commercial districts, again, with good pedestrian connectivity. You do have the full set of plans that was available through Link. I'll bring up just kind of the overall site plan to go over in a moment. Just to show you the zoning map, again, the blue in this is the neighborhood center. You have a kind of a floodplain to the west, which is that magenta color. To the immediate north is property that's owned by the town and under kind of protection for environmental purposes, or water protection purposes that we acquired through Clean Water Management Trust Fund and Wake County Open Space Grant. We do have the ability, though, to put a road through it just to create an access to the park. And then across the street, you have, or to the south and to the east, you have residential development that's either zoned R3 or R2. This is kind of the overall site plan to give you an idea of what's being proposed. You can see these are all townhome units broken up into different groupings of 4 to 6, I believe. You have a main drive that would line up with Landing View Drive going here. You also have a loop network serving the neighborhood itself, and then they have a smaller series of alleys serving the townhomes as well. These are all alley fed. The homes along the Wendell Falls Parkway would face out towards Wendell Falls Parkway, but they would not have driveways coming off of Wendell Falls Parkway. They would be accessed from the alley behind. You have a CP&L easement that cuts through the middle of this that kind of creates that break that you see. In terms of open space, you have kind of a park space up here. You have a dog park along the kind of the northeast corner. You also have a playground closer to Wendell Falls Parkway, as well as a volleyball court closer to Wendell Falls Parkway. The playground and the volleyball court would be included in the first phase development. as well as the mail kiosks, that would that would mainly allow them to get started on the lots that are right along, Wendell Falls Parkway that already have utility access, and then the remainder was being shown in phase 2. And again, you have a floodplain along the western boundary as well as that swath, the kind of gray swath you see on this along the northern property boundary is a riparian buffer that they have to stay out of, which is, they're aware of that and they're showing that. And there is a small existing cemetery on site that they'd be providing access to there. Okay, so that's just to give you kind of the overview. One other thing I'll mention is that the main drive-in, aligning with Landing View Drive, the intent of this was to not have on-street parking along that Landing View Drive, and so we're proposing that just be added as a condition that the applicant's fine with. That was kind of the intent all along, but just to make it clear to everybody.
Is that gonna be marked as no parking?
Yes. And there are a number of marked on-street parking in other areas of this development that are either coming off of the alleys or along the kind of loop road. So the intent is that on-street parking would only be unmarked spaces for this development. Oops. So there's a number of conditions going along with this. Most of these are really actually just saying that the site-specific plan that you're seeing as the master plan would be followed, 1 and 2, that what's shown in there would apply to them, that they are changing the alley section a little bit from our standard alley section because they have some, part of this is because they have some parking spaces coming off of those alleys. They want a wider street pavement section, so they're showing us 20-foot edge to edge rather than more just a one-way 12-foot lane. They're making notes that the parking spaces would be maintained by the HOA. There's 5 and 6 on this list are really just saying they'll adhere to core PUD requirements in terms of recorded plats of recombination and when they have to get certain approvals in place. They're making note on number 7 that in some cases they're applying a DOT site triangle compared to the town's kind of 25 by 25 foot site triangle. No problems there. Making note that they would do some grading in that flood hazard area just to accommodate the sewer line work. They are requesting, and this is the main reason for going through this conditional district process, they are requesting for townhomes to be permitted as a right through this approval rather than requiring a separate special use permit. Through the conditional district process, we're getting all the information you'd get as part of a special use permit anyways, and so why not do it in one stage rather than 2? And it also doesn't require us to go through that separate quasi-judicial process as part of that. They are applying a condition that you applying a maximum front setback of 16 feet from those townhomes to make sure you have that kind of more attractive, more pedestrian streetscape. With an allowance for those along Wendell Falls Parkway, they may need to be pushed further back, so they have a larger maximum front setback of 30 feet. I mentioned that we're recommending a staff condition to just clarify that on-street parking would only be within those marked spaces as noted on the master plan, and that signage would be provided along the entrances to that effect. And one item that came up, or a question that was posed, and this is something I just called the applicant on today, is a question of, well, what if phase 2 didn't happen? I mentioned that phase 1 was just kind of the fronting lots. I think it was 28 units closer to Wendell Falls Parkway. One of the nice aspects of the town of this is it would get us a step closer to have a second entrance into the park. So there was a little bit of concern expressed of, well, what if that phase 2 didn't happen? Would that negate our ability to get that second entrance? So what staff's proposing, and the applicant didn't appear to have any objections to, and I'll let them speak to that tonight as well, is having the right-of-way going ahead and be dedicated at the time of the first phase for that second phase as well. They wouldn't have to construct anything or make improvements, but just to go ahead and dedicate the right-of-way. Just in the event that something happened, we'd have that right-of-way in place going up to their northern property boundary. So that would essentially be a new condition number 12 on this. I'm not going to re-summarize what I just summarized. I mentioned they're proposing off-street parking. It's actually 55 total off-street parking, either on their loop road or on those alleys for guests or for or for just additional parking spaces for the residents themselves. In terms of open space, they're providing the appropriate amount of fully active open space, and they're providing more park space, which is maintained and has trail access, but doesn't necessarily have like a playground or something on it. They have more park space than what's outright required, about almost 10,000 extra square feet. And of their open space, only 30% of it is within that floodplain. There's a limit that no more than 50 can, but I always like to point that out just so you know how much of it is really more usable land. They're going to be connecting on some existing sewer lines, and CorPUD, of course, will be reviewing more detailed water and sewer details as part of the construction drawings. They would be making some minor improvements along, I say minor, but minor widening along Wendell Falls Parkway to accommodate what's shown as a 67-foot wide right-of-way and a road that would include bike lanes as a minor collector along Wendell Falls Parkway. And in terms of Lanny View Drive, that was shown as a minor collector that they've modified a little bit, but it's partially to match. We have a 60-foot right-of-way, or essentially within the piece of land that we would be continuing the road on. So it's to match that and to allow kind of the landscaping and a little bit wider area on the laneage. It doesn't have separate bike lanes, but you have wide lanes that you could stripe with sharrows if desired. I should mention they've also modified their internal roads a little bit to allow for that on-street. We don't have a cross-section that shows on-street parking on just one side. So they modified that cross-section some to allow for that on-street parking on just one side. And in some cases, they pulled the street trees to the back side of the sidewalk within an easement to make that fit. I already mentioned the alleys they changed from our standard cross-section and kind of why they went into that. I mentioned the phasing, 28 units in that first phase. In terms of the comprehensive plan, this area is identified as being within the S4 controlled growth area that are typically close to thoroughfares at key crossroad locations. These are areas where moderate intensity new development is appropriate, where you kind of want to try to direct growth. So the proposed development of this site meets the different uses that are kind of identified and meets the intended goal of this sector in staff's opinion. This is just a screenshot of the section of the framework plan showing, so the arrow is kind of pointing out this site. Ignore that dotted line. We've updated where we were looking at roads going, so ignore that purple dotted line for this purpose, but just to show you where this is. In close proximity, you can see just to the east of this, it's identifying areas that are S6, which is essentially our infill redevelopment area where the most intense redevelopment and kind of densities are appropriate, and this is directly abutting it. So at the February meeting, the Planning Board found the requested conditional district to be consistent with the recommended uses and development types outlined in that S4 sector, and reasonable due to its proximity to the downtown core and the town park. So they did vote in favor of it. At that time, there were still some modifications that were being made to the plans, so their proposal did include some technical corrections. All those corrections have now been incorporated into the plans. I won't read them all, but just know there were 4 corrections. All of those have now been addressed in what's coming before you tonight. And this was a unanimous vote for the Planning Board. Again, staff is in favor of this proposed master plan. In our opinion, this is kind of an ideal use given its proximity to downtown. It should help get a greater use out of the park property to the north. I mentioned the design of the master plan with the outward-facing homes on Wendell Falls Parkway to be more attractive from the streetscape and the entryway into one of the entryways in the town. Limiting on-street parking to try to create the more attractive corridor going into the park. And in our opinion, even though it seems like there's a long list of conditions, they're all really just minor things to make this work, not concessions where they're really trying to get out of requirements of the town. And they are exceeding our open space requirements, as I mentioned. So that's what I have for you tonight. I'd be happy to take questions, or if you want to hear from the applicant or public first, whatever the board's pleasure is.
Go ahead and open the public hearing.
I just one more question. David, is there any purposeful reason for why they would add those conditions in there if they're not really concessing or asking for any concessions? I mean, to me, I'm just curious. It seems weird to.
So I think some of them, they took comments that were coming out of the TRC review, and then they just moved them over. It doesn't hurt us in any way. I mean, if those comments about CorPUD weren't there, it doesn't mean they wouldn't have to do them. it might give their clients slightly more assurances on certain things, or they may just think that that's what the town wants to have those assurances.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, let's open the public hearing and, hear from the applicant.
Good evening, and thank you. My name is Mike Sanchez, and I'm with the McAdams Company in Durham, and we're the land consulting, planning and engineering firm that's working with the developer on this. Mr. Bergmark did such an awesome job of hitting all the high points. He stole my thunder, so I really don't have a lot to add to what he said. I guess the only points that I would highlight are one of the reasons that we feel like this is such a great addition to Wendell is that juxtaposition between near the downtown area and the future town park area, and the type of development that's going to meet the traditional neighborhood development style, so to speak. So you have these rear entry garages, and you have the streetscape. The homes move up a little closer to the street, and you create this kind of little town atmosphere in a traditional neighborhood style. But really what I'd like to be able to do is just, if there are questions, I will try to answer questions that folks may have.
All right, does anyone have any questions, gentlemen, for the applicant? Well, I guess Mr. Bergmark did cover everything. All right, thank you. Are there any citizens present that would like to speak for or against this project? Yes, ma'am. You have 5 minutes. Give us your name, and I know you know the drill. Give us your name and address.
Hi, my name is Carol R. Hennett, 205 Dogwood Trail in Wendell. I'm not for or against this. That's y'all's call, but I do have a concern, and that's with the ingress and egress. The primary ingress is in a very dangerous curve. I've lived here all my life, and I lived on Wendell Parkway, AKA Pool Road, most of my life. And I can tell you, people coming out of town going to Raleigh that go through Wendell Falls are flying in the morning. I had a deer jump out in front of me not too long ago in the morning, and I thought I was going to get a new bumper and a new backside of my car just from slowing down to 40 miles an hour. The other thing is the road improvement. Is the same road improvement requirement going to be placed here as placed on land being sold outside of the city limits? Because right now it's an exorbitant rate, and I didn't hear any comment on that, and I do have some grave concerns over that. But the ingress and egress, the safety of citizens living there are a major concern for me due to the traffic and the speed that people go through there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? If there's more than one, we can let them all speak, and then the applicant can, and Mr. Bergmark can address any questions anyone had. Anyone else? All right. Well, would the applicant like to address the questions?
First of all, I'd just like to say that your point is well taken with that access there and coming down along through there. What I would say is at this point, what you're seeing is a preliminary view of what's going to be developed, but we're just at the beginning stages of discussing with NCDOT as to exactly what that's going to need to be to provide the necessary safety. So I wish I had more to tell you at this point, but as we get the traffic engineers involved in this, that's where they're going to really flesh out with NCDOT what needs to happen so that we don't have a death trap being set up here.
I'll add that I don't think I specifically pointed out that there is a left turn lane shown as being an improvement to turn into this. So you're going to have an area for cars to queue. I know that doesn't entirely address her concern, but the other item too is from a safety standpoint, whenever possible, they look to align roads so that you don't have offset intersections. Those create safety hazards for people. When they're looking at this, they pretty much always look to have your alignment of your intersections, and you already have the landing view in space. Now, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be some signage or some other things that get addressed through the construction drawings to try to make sure that we make it as safe as possible, but in general, they would look to try to align those intersections.
David, could you also clarify the question about the transportation
Yes.
plan improvements here?
Yes, so the cross-section for Wendell Falls Parkway does change as you get closer into town, as you cross over Jake May Drive, kind of the entrance into Foxborough and the golf course. It does change at that point. It was for a couple of different reasons, so it does narrow down here, so it's not the same as it currently stands going kind of westward out past Jake May. Those reasons are, one, you have a bridge crossing here, so to try to limit the environmental impact of and the cost of looking at widening that bridge to accommodate a larger road. Also, you're getting into a denser area of town. We have a lot more homes that are pulled closer, so this is scaled down to a 2-lane. It does show bike lanes being added and curb and gutter and sidewalk, but it's just this section is shown as a 2-lane compared to further out. Our plans currently show a 4-lane cross section as you go further out towards Wendell Falls Parkway.
All right, does anyone else wish to speak before I close the public hearing? All right, public hearing's closed. Gentlemen, what's your pleasure? Do you have any questions based on the?
I only had one question, and that is if there's a timeline to start this project.
Timeline for starting?
The timeline for starting the project, well, at this
Could you,
point.
just for the record, thank you.
Take a more strategic sitting. The timeline for starting the project, so, hopefully the town council approves the project, but we are moving forward with the preparation of the construction drawings at this time. We're actually hoping that within the next couple weeks that we're at a point where we can submit these construction drawings. What's going to follow behind that is actually the issue that you had brought up, ma'am, is the traffic engineers are just getting involved now to do that design. But, typically working this through with, through your process and through the City of Raleigh process, we'd hope that, construction drawings would have approval within, a several month time period. And then unless you guys have something different to add, I would say that, construction would begin soon after construction drawing approval.
If you don't mind, maybe one other quick question. The one thing I really, really like is the demarcation of on-street parking, and not just having on-street parking sort of, for lack of a better term, willy-nilly.
Right.
There are, perpendicular spaces in places. There's parallel parking. It's clearly marked with curb cutouts and whatnot, where is allowed and where is not. And so my question is why? That's obviously an added expense to develop, and also cuts down on the amount of parking that, could be utilized on this project. So why did you go that route? Was it some feedback you got from TRC? I think I heard Mr. Bergmark say that, but I just wanted to know.
There was some feedback, and also it was, discussion with what the look and feel that the developer wanted to achieve on the project.
I think it's great.
Oh, great, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the conditional district for property at 616 Wendell Falls Parkway.
One thing, we did add a couple of conditions on there, so I believe we'd need to just get the applicant's okay on those additional 2 conditions.
Okay.
The conditions are all acceptable to the applicant.
Thank you very much. You want to restate your motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the conditional district, NC conditional district property located at 616 Wendell Falls Parkway with all conditions, including staff recommended conditions.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the attached ordinance with all approved conditions by the applicant. Is there any discussion on the motion? I don't know if I restated it properly. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
5B is a public hearing request by Chart House Holdings to amend the existing conditional District 16-02 regulating the property with an updated master plan, proposing multi-level climate-controlled self-storage facility and new conditions on the 1.73 acre park located at 709 Chart House Drive. Mr. Bogart.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. As stated, this is a separate conditional district request. It's essentially an amendment to an earlier adopted conditional district back from 2016. You're being asked tonight to hold a public hearing on the amendments and consider taking action. You do have an ordinance attached as well as the plan attached for your consideration with associated conditions in that ordinance. The applicant in this case is Chart House Holdings LLC. We do have Brian Gower here tonight to represent, well, himself, the applicant, really. As stated, this was an old conditional district from 2016. Looking to update that plan for new conditions on just the little less than 2 acre portion on the southern edge of it, pin number 17842633321. This property is located at the northeast corner of the Wendell Boulevard and Chart House Drive intersection. Originally, when this plan was created, it essentially created 5 lots for the original master plan, 3 larger industrial parcels in the rear along the newly created Chart House Drive, and then 2 small lots with more of a commercial highway designation in the front. This plan actually combines those front 2 lots together just to create one long, narrow, skinny lot. And of those 5 originals, AAA Lubers built their facility on one of those 3 back manufacturing lots. So again, they're looking to update that. Because they originally weren't sure what they wanted to do on the front 2 lots, they just left that essentially blank, which required them to come back with a revised master plan for your consideration and approval. This shows the current existing conditions out on site with the zonings adjacent to it, zoned commercial highway in terms of Knott Square to the west, as well as Vardy's Chiropractic to the east. The conditional district zoning, which is not showing up there, but it, again, I mentioned the kind of the back lots are zoned with a manufacturing use that I'll just circle. So starting at this point back is essentially where the manufacturing starts, and the red is the combined, what was originally lots 4 and 5, for the purpose of the indoor storage facility that the applicant's looking to do for this conditional district. That doesn't show up great, but to give you an idea, again, this is a long, skinny lot. The building structure is essentially in the middle with the stormwater. Because of the way the site is graded, they're looking to have the stormwater facility closer to the front with the actual building envelope more in the middle of the site, represented by this box. And they have a parking area, a small parking area on either side. Here and here. Sorry, so I drew the stormwater a little too close in. And they would have kind of an access drive for drop-off. Again, this is a indoor storage facility. This is a proposed 3-story facility to try to utilize the land as well as they can on this very skinny lot. So trucks would be able to come in off of an access drive into the site, flow in, and then flow back out and drop off. That's essentially it. I mean, they're showing associated, of course, landscaping. They'd have to make, stormwater improvements on site. There had, for a time, been a question about a Duke Progress Energy utility pole that was close to where they wanted to put the building. It was initially creating some uncertainty between them and the adjoining property owner, because Duke preferably wanted to relocate it, but eventually Duke agreed to permit the facility, the building on the site, to locate closer than they normally would to that existing pole, so that essentially eliminated that concern and allowed them to progress forward and come to you with this revised plan. And I apologize that picture doesn't come up better than it does. So hopefully some of y'all looked at that as well online using the link.
Are there any questions for Mr. Brookmark?
So David, there's no more really lot 4 and lot 5 then being separate lots, it's basically now all coming together?
Just one lot. In fact, they've already recombined the parcels, just actually, yeah, it's only one parcel currently. They had originally thought they could maybe split it in two, but it's just one now. That's just a basic idea of your elevations with kind of a colored masonry type material along the, let me give you an idea of which elevations would cover which. So along Wendell, facing Wendell Boulevard, you'd have that. On the back side facing away from Wendell Boulevard would be this one. The side that's facing Chart House Drive would have some garage access or door bays along that bottom floor. Additional floors, you'd enter the building and go up elevators to get to those additional units. And then the back side, kind of facing to the east towards Vardy Chiropractic, would be essentially that elevation. They do have conditions associated with this. Many of the conditions were just carryovers from the previous approval that don't really go away. But to go through that, there are 6 proposed conditions. 1 through 4 were previously approved from the original approval, dealing with curbing, bioretention options, allowing for wheel stops for parking islands, or for parking spaces and landscape islands, saying that the Wendell Boulevard frontage requirements would be determined at the time of the final development plan. So this is for this lot, essentially, facing Wendell Boulevard. So this is just the master plan. The final development plan is essentially your construction drawings. Just in conditional district speak, they give it a different name. So essentially, when that construction drawings or final development plan comes in, that's when the final improvements along Wendell Boulevard would be determined. They know that along this very limited stretch, they're looking to request a fee in lieu, so they're just asking for that fee in lieu request to come back before this board once they have a better idea of what those definite changes would be along that limited frontage to request a fee in lieu. Another previously approved condition was prohibiting outdoor storage within the Lot 4, to not allow on-street parking along Chart House Drive. So those are all already included. What's in terms of new for this request is looking at eliminating, normally there's a 100-foot maximum front setback requirement along this section of Wendell Boulevard. So Wendell Boulevard is broken into context zones under a gateway overlay. This falls under context zone 2. And in general, I support the intent of that to try to bring buildings closer as you get closer into town. But in this case, you're looking at a pretty limited site. You're looking at an entrance to kind of a small industrial park, and there are valid engineering reasons for them requesting to push that building back. So staff doesn't really have any objections to that request. So the building would be closer to 230 foot back compared to 100 foot back. But this isn't really a lot that's conducive to, nor a use that you necessarily are trying to pull up and make a really interactive, attractive streetscape along this stretch. The other request is simply to push you could probably do this without a condition, in all honesty, but to push the landscaping, the street trees that are on Wendell Boulevard, just to show it on the back side of that sidewalk rather than the front side. And they would have to have, and so we don't have any objection to that. They would have a 20-foot street yard buffer, would be required anyways. And we commonly do this because often DOT doesn't want to allow that closer to the road. So those are the only 2 new conditions as part of this proposal. So as currently proposed, again, what they're really just looking for is an increased setback and some modifications to the location of that planting behind the right-of-way. I think I already mentioned there are the ultimate fee in lieu would be based on the cross-sections in place. We may be looking at possible changes to this. Who knows? That's part of the reason I think they wanted to wait, as well as the fact that there were improvements associated with Wendell Builder Supply that have not yet been installed yet, so they want to see how that pans out before they put in that fee in lieu request as well. But again, that would be required prior to their final development plan approval. In terms of the comprehensive plan, this is also within the S4 controlled growth sector. I mentioned it was in the Wendell Boulevard Gateway Corridor, which which kind of impacted that maximum front setback. S4 sector are typically close to thoroughfares and at key crossroad interlocations. This is Wendell Boulevard, so certainly a critical, or immediately adjacent to a major thoroughfare for the town. And in staff's opinion, the proposed development on the site kind of meets the appropriate uses within the S4 sector. This is just a screenshot of a portion of that framework plan. You don't really see any other color. You're just starting to see a little bit of the S6 infill coming into the corner where you have Food Line, but otherwise everything you see in this region is within that S4 sector. Planning Board voted unanimously 7-0 in favor of this request at their January meeting, and staff is in favor of it. This subject property, its shape has limited uses. The applicant's additional conditions are really just meant to allow it to work on this somewhat limited site. So that's all staff has for you. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Anyone have any questions? Yes.
And you may have mentioned that was a lot of information. Once again, very well put together. But like I said, you may have already mentioned this, but in that increased setback, there's a big rectangle sort of shaped space. Is that just going to be open grass? Is that going to be stormwater retention? What's going to be?
They're going to have a stormwater retention there.
Stormwater retention.
Yes.
Okay. It just wasn't marked on the map, on the drawing.
It may have just been that what I included as an attachment, I think, was just it might have been the landscape plan, but it should be marked in the overall master plan that has several pages. But I'll double check to make sure it's marked.
Okay.
All right, we'll open the public hearing and hear from the applicant. Is the applicant here tonight?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you, David, for the wonderful presentation. Thank you all for hearing me here today. I saw a great need for this with Wendell Falls coming to the area and all the new people coming in. We don't have a lot of storage in Wendell, so I thought it was a great place to put it. My engineer's not here, so I'm having to do the speaking. I apologize. I developed Chart House and built AAA louvers. Pretty proud of the way it looks, the way it turned out. I hope it was an asset to Wendell.
It is.
And I hope this continues to be.
All right.
If you have any questions, I can answer.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
Is this when someone can speak in objection?
In just a minute, I'm gonna call you in just a minute. Okay. All right, thank you. We might call you back.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, are there any citizens who would like to speak for or against this project? You have come up to the microphone, give me your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm Julia Ledford. I and my husband Joe live at 3 Ledford Lane, and there is a field between our house and the Vardy property, and then where this is going to be. So I am concerned about the increased traffic along there. We built our house in 1963, and you could turn out of the driveway most any time without even looking almost. And now it is literally dangerous to get out of our own driveway. And every time you allow another business to come in, that increases that. So my question that I want you to consider is, do you have a plan in place to widen that roadway through there, or do something that prevents future accidents? You've got a school that people turn in and out of what I call Loop Road, all the time. So that's bringing traffic through there. We're getting a Hardee's, I understand. We're going to get more traffic. I don't think a storage facility is necessarily going to bring a lot of traffic, but everything you do brings traffic. I would ask this board to remember that you are encroaching on all sides on an established residential neighborhood that is piece by piece falling apart because of that encroachment. My husband's family has owned this property for over 100 years. We're not going anywhere. Lord willing, we're going to be right there. Our children will be there, our grandchildren. So I'm also concerned about the quality of life that you're allowing to diminish. I sit on a bench every afternoon and watch God's beautiful sunset. I don't want 3-story buildings in our neighborhood. That's a real, there's no other 2- or 3-story building in that stretch of road from Marshburn Road to Hepzibah. So please don't allow any high construction in this area where there are still people living. I also am concerned for their sake about the water drainage. When the property was developed behind Vardy's, for the first time in the 56 years we've been there, we saw water standing in our field. His place was flooded. So that little strip of land, when we drove around to see this damage, it was underwater a foot deep 3 days later. So I don't know what the storm water drainage plan is, but for their sake, it better be a good one. And we surely don't want any more water in our field. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Bergmark, you want to talk a little bit about the road?
Certainly. There definitely are, part of the reason we have transportation plan improvements, or transportation plans and required improvements as development occurs, is to slowly over time address the concerns that she's expressing with increased traffic. There's certainly going to be increased traffic over time. Currently this section calls for a 4-lane road. Again, they're looking at only about 100 feet of frontage, so rather than, it doesn't make sense to try to widen just for 100 feet. So they are looking to do a fee in lieu, but that money is available for the town if that fee in lieu were presented and accepted by the board to make transportation improvements where needed. I'll also mention that, again, there are improvements that are already approved as part of the Wendell Builders supply site it's going to be adding turn lanes into this onto Chart House Drive. So there are improvements that are already approved and being required, and there's a bond in place under DOT to make some improvements to this specific intersection. I'll also speak to the drainage concern. She's absolutely right. There's a drainage issue there. We're aware of this. This should dramatically help that, actually, because right now it's on a vacant lot. They'll have to, when they come in and propose the development proposal and the stormwater plan for this, they'll have to address the water that's currently flowing in the site and kind of getting stuck there and convey that, either retain from a storm event and convey to the storm drainage system. So this should actually help out the adjoiners in terms of the drainage concerns by making somebody address what's collecting on the site right now.
Does the applicant have anything he'd like to add? Would you like to add anything?
About the stormwater, I've known it's a problem. When we first came to the town to develop Chart House Drive, we didn't want to put curb and gutter and sidewalk and all that in there. So we agreed to do it for the town. In doing so, we raised the grade of that area 6 inches, depth of the curb and gutter. So that acted as a dam and backed up water. So until I can get this site approved, which I'm intending on getting all that water out of there, but I can't do it until I get permitted. So, and it's on one of the first phases of site development is to treat that water or let that water flow through. So we've got everything designed and sent to Wake County for approval. So hopefully all this will get going away.
Okay. Are there any other citizens who'd like to speak for or against this project?
Kurt Phipps, 515, 515 Lylstein Road. Two things. One is the stormwater issue, and I'm glad to see, and I'm not opposed to this, storage facility. However, the stormwater situation is going to probably get a lot worse before it gets better. I've already talked with Mr. Bergmark. Vardy's has no stormwater retention. Wendell Builders has no stormwater retention. Knott's Landing, Knott Square has no stormwater retention. I mean, I know it looks like it, but it doesn't back up any water. It just runs down that ditch and into the pipe. And my interest is, because all that water is coming my way, we've got probably an acre pond on the other side of Wendell Boulevard. It already runs over the dam of the pond when there's a good rain. So as it develops back behind Wendell Builders and the other part of Charterhouse, it's just going to be more water coming, and I don't have the answer. The other thing is Ms. Ledford referred to some plan to widen the road. There is a plan. It's going to probably cost her $250,000–300,000. Cost me $1.5 million, as I understand it, and I am totally opposed to all of that. But stormwater is the main issue, and as I said, I've talked to Mr. Bergmark about it, and I see this one does have a retention pond, so that's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we can close the public hearing. Are there any questions from the board?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion, if we're ready for that.
Yep.
To approve the conditional district along Charterhouse Drive.
So we have a motion to approve the conditional district on Charterhouse Drive. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I've got a comment, Madam Mayor. First to Charterhouse, if we had gone with the swell bank, it's from my amendment of 2016, maybe the water runoff wouldn't be bad, but I have walked and witnessed from Wendell Building Supply all the way over to see that water issue. It's an issue, and I appreciate staff recognizing that, and you're recognizing it. I think Commissioner Boyette wins here because he said you would never put anything on Lot 1, and I don't think a retention pond counts under his bet, but I'm glad to see this move. Ms. Ledford, we're growing, and it's frustrating, and it comes with challenges, and it comes with gains, and it comes with losses. And I completely acknowledge your position, and I want you to know I understand your position. That said, this piece of property was sold to this gentleman, and I want you to know that you're heard.
So we have a motion to approve the conditional district along Charterhouse Drive. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. All right. Thank y'all.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
before we completely move on, can I ask one somewhat related question to Mr. Bergmark?
Yeah, of course.
The point was brought up that there was a retention pond that doesn't do very much retentioning. Whose responsibility is it to make sure those things are maintained to the standard in which they were built, or that they're functioning properly?
So Witt County Environmental serves essentially as our stormwater administrator. I can ask them to take a look at that. We've had them out on site to look at the AAA Louvers retention pond that they built as part of their site. I don't know if, when they came out to that, if they looked at the Knott Square to see how it's performing, but I'd be happy to ask them to take a look.
I mean, if that concern's been raised, then I would definitely like to see it looked at. Thank you. Do that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 5C is the discussion and action on a zoning text amendment to sections 2.3, 3.3, and 19.3 of the UDO as it relates to indoor amusements, game rooms, and pool halls. The public hearing for this item is closed, and the board is going to receive some staff revisions that were asked for at the June 10th meeting.
Mr. Bergmark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. As stated, we had the public hearing on this on June 10th. We were directed to remove supplemental standards 2 and 3 that were regarding hours of operation and transparency standards. We were also asked to amend standard number 1 to remove the language "or any audio system." There was a condition that talked about outdoor PA systems. We're just asked to remove that language that talked about "or any audio system." And we were also asked to add a staffing requirement within the definition, per the attorney's recommendation, for indoor amusements, to make it clear this is a facilitated facility, and it's facilitated through on-site staffing. And finally, we were asked to amend the proposal to not require a SUP for this use in the DMX district. Originally, what came before you showed it as requiring an SUP in the DMX district. So you have that amended ordinance to reflect those changes. Again, you can just see there in yellow how the definition was changed. It was changed to say establishments that provide facilitated, and in parentheses, through on-site staffing, commercial recreational activities, et cetera, and so forth. The removal of "or any audio system" from that one standard that would be attached regarding noise. And finally, in this case, it's just a matter of not amending the use table, because currently it does not show special use required. So it was changed to show what's currently there. Again, Planning Board did recommend approval of what was presented to them, and we made the changes as requested. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Great. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bergmark?
I guess not so much a question, I'll just start talking here. Last time we were here, we spoke on this topic, and I believe many of us, or at least I would speak for myself, I talked about the ability to control business hours for business and some of the other regulations we were putting on there, and not something that I felt comfortable doing. I spoke with Ms. Starr, who spoke here earlier today, and regarding some of her concerns, and I let her know that I still didn't really like the idea of putting on business hours. I felt like that was not our place at all. I did, however, after speaking to her, feel like some of the initial discussions the Planning Board had with making sure that making sure that the business was visible from the outdoors or from the outside would be a good thing. I think for safety, for our law enforcement, just patrolling businesses after hours, during hours, I think it'd be a good thing to have. I'm fine with what's been presented today. I would just add that as one other addition on there, and David, I don't know if we have to go back to the attorney and let him look at the paperwork again, but I would add in basically a condition that the windows should be, or maybe tinted to the level set by North Carolina ordinances for motor vehicles. So they want to apply a little tint on there, that's fine, just not to the point of blacking out and still allowing a safe level for police officers to be able to view inside. And that would be my only other comment I'll make on this.
So are you looking to have a standard that says it cannot be tinted more than that level? I'm just thinking right now, there isn't anything that specifically prohibits it.
Yeah, it's part 2 of the equation, in talking with Commissioner Lutz. If we're gonna write a rule, let's write a rule for everybody. So my request to staff would be, after this evening, please bring us back something that applies to the whole town, everything in the DMX, with a similar ordinance, and I believe it's 2127 is the general statute. But essentially, if you can tint your vehicle windows to that level, you can tint your business windows to that level, and that gives the chief an easy way to enforce it. Those guys are already enforcing, theoretically, that limit. But I think there was some concern that if we didn't do it tonight, that we would lose our opportunity to do it. My original idea was the whole DMX and do it later, but we can do it this way as long as we agree to do it. As long as long as we agree to come back and do the other part of it. And this just gives people the option to tint their windows, but sets the, otherwise.
Are you wanting to not have other kinds of window
if you want-
coverings at all, or do you just want to say if you wanted tinted?
This is more of a permanent effect on the window.
Okay.
And from that standpoint, that's why I'll focus just on
Okay.
this. I mean, if they wanna put a
Blinds
5%
or
window tint
something.
up and then put a big thick blind in there, I mean, that's not my place. But, I mean, this is at least a permanent fix they can put on the business that would, I think, directly affect law enforcement. I don't know, it's just my thought.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. First off, if we're making something, it should apply to all the businesses in the district and not just one. So I'm fine with that. The other thing is I've had the windows on my vehicles tinted. I do now and have in the past. And as part of getting my vehicle inspected, it has to be checked. I don't claim to know all the wide and wondrous things that exist in the world, but every time my window tint has been checked, it has been checked with a small little device that's about this big with a slot cut in it. And I have to roll my window down, and it's placed over the top of the glass and reads through it. And that's fine if you can roll your window down. But if you have a window that's in a frame, that's not going to work. And I'm sure the police chief could speak more to it. They may make some for ones that can't be opened or whatever. I'm not sure whether we have the ability to be policing that sort of thing. I just wanted to bring that up. Every time I've ever been checked, it's been over the edge of the glass.
You just want to make sure if we're going to put
I want to make
something
sure
we
that we're
can
going to be able
enforce
to
it.
enforce it. That's right.
I understand.
That's correct. The ones you do most commonly see officers have on the side of the road and even in inspections are the one piece. It's about the size of that box. But they do make a two-piece one that can go on window and actually can measure windows up to 1 inch thick. I'll be happy to work with David and identify those options for the town if you all elect to go this route.
I just wanted to bring that up.
And no,
that
that's a good point. We don't want to do anything we can't enforce.
All right.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? Comments? Anybody?
Mayor, just a clarification, the motion, Commissioner Lutz, the motion is that the windows cannot be tinted beyond the level allowed by DMV.
Yes, I believe they cannot be darker than what the DMV would allow, is that correct?
That's what I understood.
Okay.
And are we okay if I just make that as a motion and we proceed as, I mean, is there any need to have more looking over paperwork or anything, or?
Well, why don't you
Ready to go?
restate the whole thing if we're getting ready to go to a whole
For
motion?
clarification, can the motion also include direction of staff for the follow-up, so that I heard two members say that they're interested in the DMX for all businesses that are future permitted to apply. I just want to make sure that that's included in the motion.
Okay. All right. Making it work here. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the zoning text amendment to sections 2.3, 3.3, 19.3 as it relates to indoor amusements, game halls, and pool halls, based on tonight's presentation from Town Planner David Burmark, with the changes, also to include a statement that the window tinting may not be greater than what's allowed by North Carolina ordinances for motor vehicles, and then also for the town staff to report back to the board with, or to form language that applies to the same policy and the same standard to the whole DMX district.
So you want them to come back to the board with language about the rest of is that what you're saying? So that ain't gonna happen now. Is that correct?
So my understanding is that the motion was to approve the language presented with the additional requirement for the business, for that business use now.
Right.
But and then that's kind of one part of the approval.
Mhm.
The section part is for staff to draft another text amendment and work through the process that would apply that same standard to all uses in the DMX.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we have a motion to approve the zoning text amendment as they, to sections 2.3, 3.3, and 19.3 of the UDO as it relates to indoor amusements, game rooms, and pool halls, to include window tinting as to be tinted to the level set by North Carolina ordinances for motor vehicles, but not beyond that level, and to direct town staff to draft an amendment to apply the same to the rest of the businesses in the DMX. Is that correct statement of your motion?
Perfect.
All right. All right, is there any discussion on the motion? Yes.
This is the culmination of what I will call the worst piece of policy making that we have done in my time of being on this board. And I want to, after working with Commissioner Lutz, and Commissioner Myrick spoke to me this afternoon about 4:45. He can tell you that we didn't talk about this because the idea hadn't come up yet. We had a friendly conversation over to the side right before the meeting and came up with something we felt like was a solution. That's how good policy gets made. We are all going to live here together for a long time. And just like I had to say to Ms. Ledford, I understand exactly how you feel, but that's not the right policy decision. Sometimes we have to say that. Making that personal, making it a bigger thing than it is, making it pointed at one particular person, going after particular individuals, and as long as I sit in the seat, ever asking me to use the thumb of government to lean down on someone else because we don't like them is not something I'm going to be a part of. I look forward to working with everybody in this room and everybody in this town to make this town a better place. But this process and how it came about and what it has become is not something that I'm excited about. We've had better days.
This has been a hard one. I agree. Does anyone else have any comments? I'm not going to restate the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right. 4-1. Moving to our administrative items. Item 6A is the Camping Street closing for the farmers market. We're going to hear from the town manager, Mark Collins.
Mayor, we'll need to be excused.
Okay, you're excused.
Mr. Manager, I apologize. I need to go to Raleigh. Thank you. You have my full endorsement on the rest of the agenda.
Thank you. So, closing a Camping Street wouldn't typically come before the Board of Commissioners. It's typically in our code and policy, it's a minor street closing. However, the repeated closing of that minor street for the farmers market, I wanted to make sure that to me that's a little different than a one-time closing for an event that's permissible by the town manager. So, since it's a continued closing of an area of public right-of-way, I wanted to come before you and just get your endorsement of that every Saturday from 9 to 1, the setup and down time before to close the area of Camping Street between Main Street and Tobacco Alley for the operation of a farmer's market. If you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Does anyone have any questions for the manager? Do we have a motion to approve the recurring minor street closing?
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. And of course, we've already done 6B and C. We're going to move into number 7, other business, and have updates on board committees by town board members. We'll start with Technical Review Committee and Commissioner Carroll.
I failed the board this time. I do not have that update, but I'll have it at the next meeting.
Well, it must be contagious. My car gave me some trouble, and I was not able to go to Campo.
Golf cart won't
They
go that
no,
far?
my golf cart won't go that far, and I may be having to trade. I'm kind of panicking. I really would rather not, but I don't have any air conditioning. I'm kind of traumatized by it. It's getting hot. But that isn't what was going on that day, so I'm at that point. I will give y'all an update, though, on Campo when I get the minutes for that. So let's move into our commissioners' reports. We'll start with Commissioner Boyette.
Normally I wouldn't have anything to add tonight, but I caught a news story, on, WREL right before, came to the meeting, that referenced Eastern Wake County. Tonight, tomorrow night, and Wednesday night in Roseville, I believe the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, as well as some others, are holding a workshop, speak around, referencing the citizens in Eastern Wake County who have found high levels of uranium and radon in their well water. I grew up on well water. I drank well water for 20-some years. I still have a hard time with city water. When you grow up with the best, you know. But I would encourage anyone who is in the ETJ or on well water for any reason to please check that out. It is a health concern, and like I said, it's being held in Roseville. And I barely caught the end of it. I wish I'd have known about it sooner so I could have got a little bit more information. But my understanding is they'll be meeting both tomorrow and Wednesday night. We may be able to get something out on social media or something.
We'll do that.
Referencing that, because I know there are a couple of neighborhoods in our ETJ that have had some issues.
Yeah.
With the uranium and the radon, and we have a couple of community-wide water systems that are either in the ETJ or just outside the ETJ that have to filter for radon. So I would encourage anyone that might be affected by that to take advantage of that resource. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Myrick?
Nothing like there.
Commissioner Lutz?
Just thanks to the town staff for Big Truck Day on Saturday. It was a good time, and I got to spend a lot of time out there with the kids, so it was fun. Thank you, guys.
Commissioner Carroll?
No comment, Mayor.
All right, well, I too want to thank the staff for Big Truck Day, Parks and Rec. It was a lot of fun. I can still hear the horns a little bit in my head. I live real close, and they were blowing all morning, but it was fun. Those little children were really enjoying their time out there. I want to remind you that of the July 4th celebration hosted by the Wendell Historical Society. The parade begins at 10:30. Sign up for a children's portion of it. You can start as early as 10. There's going to be a parade, presentation, and free food, hot dogs and watermelon, I believe. Friday, July 5th at noon, municipal filing for elections opens. The town of Wendell will have a mayor and 2 commissioners on the 2019 ballot. Persons may file for candidacy at the Wake County Board of Elections, and that has relocated. It's no longer downtown Raleigh, so you don't have to fight that. It's 1200 North New Hope Road in Raleigh. And you can look on the Town of Elections, Wake County Board of Elections website and get more specific information if you're interested in that. Saturday, July 20th, the Wendell Parks and Recreation and Wendell Falls is going to co-host their first outdoor movie at the Lakeside Pavilion. That's a free community event. You are urged to attend. And The Incredibles 2. So, since we last met, I have been asked to serve on the Interact Steering Committee that is seeking to develop a family justice center. What they would like to do for all of Wake County, and what they're trying to do is to get all the services required and that Interact provides in one spot and under one roof. Currently, it's going to be at their location. Let's see. And as they outgrow that spot, they will maybe need to relocate, but phase 1 is to get all the services in that one spot. Interact provides support to victims of domestic and sexual abuse. They have a 24-hour victim hotline. They do community outreach, court advocacy, and assist in filings and protective orders by victims. They have emergency shelters. They do group counseling and individual counseling. They provide services and support for victims and their family and children. This is an important thing that is available in Wake County, and I wasn't aware of it until actually the chief brought it to my attention a few years ago. And it's something that a lot of citizens from Wendell make use of. So I was real flattered to be asked to be part of it. They're always seeking more people and volunteers, and you know, we all get asked to volunteer for things 100 times a day, but I think this is definitely worthwhile. If you're looking for a way to spend your time, please let me know, and I can put you in touch with who that you need to be in touch with for that. I also attended this year's graduation at East Wake High School. It's always a fun day to be at that, bittersweet for all the moms and dads. This year, over $3 million in scholarships were awarded to the graduates at East Wake High School. I'm very proud of them for that. And congratulate the graduates and their families, and look forward to the great things that I'm sure that they're all going to accomplish. Let me see. Oh, Wendell Middle School is holding a community forum this Thursday night at 6. The principal at Wendell Middle School has been transferred to a high school, so they're looking for a new principal, and they're interested in what you think about it. So if you have an opinion, and we'd love to know what it is, I'd love for you to share it. Go to the community forum this Thursday at 6 at the middle school. And also, one last thing, we talked about it earlier, but our farmers market is opening this Saturday in the downtown, and is it opening at 9 o'clock on Campen Street. So come on down there. This is the perfect time of year. All the vegetables are coming off everywhere, and enjoy the farmers market right in the middle of our downtown. All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.